love, and they want to be loved, and they want to stay in love, right? When a loving relationship that's deep and intimate is hurt and wounded and falls apart, it's devastating to people. It's just devastating. So the greatest endeavor of your life is to fall in love and stay in love, particularly when it comes to a marriage covenant, because it helps you become, like we said on Tuesday, the best version of yourself this side of heaven. I believe it's the dream of most young people. It's the foundation of your family. If you think
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salty Pastor Podcast. The entire point of this podcast is to help you grow in your faith. When you grow in your faith, everything else in your life comes into focus. As a matter of fact, the more you grow in your faith, the easier life becomes. You grow more confident and courageous in your life. You learn how to overcome obstacles and challenges, things that are holding you back. In many ways, the more you grow, it allows you to see these day-to-day problems and they just simply drift away from you. But in order to grow your faith, you have to realize it takes work. Fluff is not enough, and you need to start thinking for yourself. You need to develop your own set of core beliefs. You need to have your own code of honor that you believe in, and that is what the Salty Pastor is all about, coaching you up to grow into the best version of yourself. My name is Jesse Mayer. I'll be your host, but we cannot do this without the one, the only remote Salty Pastor himself, Dr. Douglas Peak.
Hello, everybody. Here I am on assignment. Boy, I always wanted to say that. Not that it makes me. We're going to be spending this summer doing a lot of different things, broadcasting from a lot of different places. And so I'm just excited about all the new stuff that we're going to be doing on the Salty Pastor podcast. Super excited about the website and everything that it's doing. Go there, check it out. Also, I want to encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. Love for you to go over there. Look up the Salty Pastor, like and subscribe, because that helps the algorithm. All of these things are coming together. We're really growing in the Salty Pastor, I would say, kind of ecosystem, if you may. And I just hope that you all are out there enjoying it, sharing it with your friends. If you'd love to support us, we would love to have you jump on board and be a part of the Salty crew, because we think that God is using this to really help people discover their faith and also understand what's going on in this world, and so that they can think for themselves. And that's what this is all about. So very excited about all the new developments on the Salty Pastor ecosystem, and I'm so glad that all of you are joining us.
Absolutely. And on Tuesday, we discussed the beauty of the marriage covenant and its powerful influence on our lives in such a positive way. This is our final podcast as part of this series on this subject for right now. And I want to focus on all the ways our society is, I guess, undermining, maybe even destroying the marriage covenant at this point. Yeah. Pastor, can you speak to some of these things and what's going on in the world?
Well, just as a quick reminder, throughout this whole series is that I want people to fall in love, and I want people to stay in love. It's one of the greatest endeavors in life. It really is. And I've never heard anybody say to me ever, I don't want anybody to love me. Just leave me alone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People want love, and they want to be loved, and they want to stay in love, right? When a loving relationship that's deep and intimate is hurt and wounded and falls apart, it's devastating to people. It's just devastating. So the greatest endeavor of your life is to fall in love and stay in love, particularly when it comes to a marriage covenant, because it helps you become, like we said on Tuesday, the best version of yourself this side of heaven. I believe it's the dream of most young people. It's the foundation of your family. If you think about it, if you're a man and you get married and you have children, it will become the biggest blessing in your life. It teaches you more about who you are. It's going to sharpen you. It's going to inspire you. Having kids is the best way to understand your relationship with God. Men, I'll tell you this, you will discover your true nature. It deepens you spiritually when you raise children. It motivates you in ways you never imagined. When you're young and you're single, sometimes you slough off, take a little PTO day when you're not even sick, or you procrastinate and get to something later. But when you have a family and they're depending on you, you go out, you work to provide even when you're sick, right? Marriage resonates. This is so important. Marriage resonates with the core nature of a man. And so unless you've been given the gift to be single that Jesus talks about in Matthew 19, your nature as a man resonates with the covenantal marriage. Men who get married and have children live longer. They have a much more fulfilling life. They are much more sexually fulfilled. They're happier. They have deeper levels of peace. They report much higher levels of well-being. It this covenant inspires you to be, a tough but tender leader, sacrificial, and all of these things help a man really develop into the fullness of his masculinity. See, unfortunately, because it's such a powerful influence on men, when it goes bad, boy, it has devastating effects. I've seen, read, studied, look at the research. There's millions of men in America right now who were wounded because of a failed marriage or maybe rebellious teens. Satan knows how powerful the covenant of marriage can be and the structure of a family is, so he does everything he can to undermine it. He wants to ruin it, poison it, destroy it. And if he's successful, the damage can be massive. There's all these men who are walking around have relational PTSD, and it impacts people so much. And so it's not just men, it's women too. When a young woman gets married, you see many of the same things that happen to men happen to her, but in a different way with a feminine ethos. If she feels safe, secure, protected, provided for, she's free in that feminine nature, that feminine ethos to nurture and bring forth life, to love and encourage those around her. She'll be more emotionally fulfilled. She'll be more connected. She'll be more community oriented. Research states that what she's going to think about at the end of her life is her family more than anything else. That will bring her the greatest sense of value and fulfillment. It's interesting because people know, though, women know that when it goes bad, it's incredibly painful. And what influences this is how you grew up in so many different ways, whether you have the skills and the knowledge to pursue a covenantal relationship. And I think that's why more people struggle with pursuing it in our society, because no one has been taught how. It hasn't been modeled. There's an old adage out there: some people love their families, other people want to escape their families. But the one thing you cannot escape is that your family molds and shapes the trajectory of your life in ways you never imagined. So therefore, if you're thinking about getting married, or if you're married, I hope you see that the marriage covenant is a gift from God when you pursue it in its original intent. This goes to the very core of your nature, of what it means to be a human being, how you define it. Let's go back to week 2, right? And remember, the tool of defining human nature, there's only 3 basic categories, right? There is the dualistic one, there is the secular humanist or atheistic one, and then there is the Christian one. If you start with the atheistic position, then marriage is not about love. There is no actual bonding, even though research says this is what happens. There's no long-term efficacy to staying together. Right? You have one nature. There's nothing wrong with your nature. So anything you feel or want to do is good. So go pursue it, right? I want to be happy. It's a worshiping of self above all else. If you start with the dualistic position, right? I think it's important to understand is that the original intent of marriage was designed to control the part of your nature that is flawed. And the problem I have with this vision of marriage is that it puts the marriage in a negative light. You get married to control yourself. You don't get married to become a better person, right? You got to control yourself, because I can only feed this side of me because the other side of me is bad. And if I feed it, it's going to tank everything in my life. That's the problem with dualism, is that it takes some of the most beautiful and wonderful gifts of God and turns them into religions, or in the sense of they're controlling influences in our lives. In other words, well, you got to get religious so you can control your base desires. Well, that's not exactly how it was meant to be. All right. If you start with the Christian position of your nature, then there was an original intent for the relationship between a man and a woman, right? The original intent was that we become one flesh, that we have responsibilities, that we work, that we be fruitful, we multiply, right? That's original intent. So then what we do is we realize, how is sin kind of messing that up a little bit? So what marriage then becomes is not something to control you because it's good for society. What it is it's the path to becoming the best version of yourself, right? That really resonates with the deep needs of a female and the deep, needs of a male in the masculine. So that's what I love about the Christian beginning point, is that it really focuses the marriage covenant on a path of something that is hopeful and inspirational and powerful and molding into the best version this side of heaven that you could ever be.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think what's interesting is you really have brought out the point that if you don't know which of these you believe at your core about marriage, you're walking in kind of blind, and then you're going to not understand why it's not working the way you quote unquote thought it would in your life if you don't know what you and your partner both believe about what marriage is supposed to be and what it's supposed to do in your life and what it's supposed to be about, right? And so it's those unmet expectations of, well, I'm just trying to control my urge so I don't, run around. Well, that's very different from someone who's going, you're helping me transform into the best person I could ever be on this earth. Right. It's like, those are two very different viewpoints on something. And so understanding that what you believe, like you said, and you say this all the time, what you believe about is one of the most important things about you. Right. And so you have to understand what is your core understanding of this thing that you're getting into before you get into it. Otherwise, you're going to be met with a lot of issues. But we see so many areas in which this covenant, especially if it's done right, can do as far as how powerful it is on us as human beings when you get married. Is that why Satan's trying to mess with it all the time? Because it's so powerful in our lives, because it can be so transformational, because it can make us the best people this side of heaven? Like, is that why he's constantly undermining it, I guess?
Yeah, well, I believe so, yeah. But it's really so interesting how it's really happened in the last 150 years. One of the strangest things about the modern world is the manner in which it's changed the view of marriage between a man and a woman. Every ancient civilization, right? The Sumerians, which was Mesopotamia, Egyptian, Chinese, even the Indus Valley, all you go back and look, some of these, there's a few fragments of documents that are over 4,000 years old, almost 5,000 years old, and you see how they protected the marriage, right? They had marriage contracts. It's just fascinating. Every empire since then held marriage in high regard. We look at the Carthaginians, the early Greeks, and Athens and Sparta, the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, which was massive and huge, the Mongols, even the Second Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne, the Islamic caliphates, even the Ottoman Empire, the Prussians. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. Have always held marriage in high regard. But ever since the sexual revolution of the 60s, American society has changed the notion of marriage. With the advent of no-fault divorce, which Ronald Reagan signed as the California governor, which, by the way, he says is his biggest regret in his entire life was signing that. Marriage in America has become like making pancakes, nothing wrong with throwing the first one away. And this is just silly. The sexual revolution was not as much about sex as it was about worship of self. See, a lot of people don't remember, like, you remember we referenced this, the Summer of Love, right, in our video bump in 1967. What people don't realize is that sexual freedom was the same thing with drug freedom, right? And also against anti-war freedom. So these things were all coupled together. It wasn't just sex, it was all of these things, free love. And so it was about worship of self and whatever the self desired. And so since the 70s, we have increasingly raised children into adulthood who've been taught, above all else, worship yourself. Whatever you feel, whatever you want is the highest virtue in your life.
Mm.
Never realizing, and this is what's so sad about this, never realizing that the people telling our children this are using our children's desires against them to manipulate them and trap them. You know, one of the oldest fairy tales, Pinocchio, right? He wanted to become a boy. He wanted to be a human, a full human. And so what does he do? He sees a Pied Piper and follows him to what? Pleasure Island, where
Right.
you worship yourself and you get to do whatever you want to do all day long, but something starts to happen that nobody expects. And what do all the boys turn into that they didn't realize as they pursued their own selfish desires? They
Donkeys.
turned into donkeys. And when this story was written and developed, what was the donkey for? It was a beast of burden.
Mm.
It existed for no other purpose than to pull heavy loads. So it's dehumanizing. Um, that's what's so sad about it. There's also a very, very strong political movement against marriage. It's just really surprising how many people buy into this in America. A lot of people are not aware that in the Communist Manifesto and in some of his other essays, Karl Marx explicitly states that he had to get rid of marriage and the nuclear family in order to create his socialist utopia. He said, as long as marriage and the nuclear family remain intact, people would resist the state because a strong marriage and nuclear family tends toward independence. It thinks for itself.
Mm.
And that's taken deep root in America today. Critical social theory that came out of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory in the 40s is all based on this. Critical race theory is all based on this. Third wave feminism has as its express goal is that the elimination of all men. One third wave feminist said our goal is to reduce the male population to 10% of the global population. I mean, this is crazy stuff. But, you know, what's also interesting is the MGTOWs. This is the movement of men going their own way. They say there's no incentive for a man to get married anymore, right? So they have a huge negative view of marriage. All progressive politics has a very negative view of marriage. So how can you fall in love and stay in love and experience the covenantal blessing of marriage that God intended, right? Especially when you pursue it towards its original intent, when you live in a society that has such a low view of it. Does anyone really know what happens when we go down this road as a society, when we undermine marriage to the point that it's so insignificant that it doesn't matter? Can we looked at any society in the last 7,000 years where this pursuit of craziness has ever worked? Has it ever built a better society? Has an empire, a nation ever come to prominence on it? Of course not. Does it build better communities? Never. Does it build better neighborhoods? No. Do children thrive in those environments? Never. I don't understand how anybody with half a brain can seriously see that our hatred in our society of marriage and all of the things that we're doing, either economically, politically, legally, or socially about marriage is beneficial at any level.
Yeah, I think as we're looking throughout history, and we're looking especially in our most recent history of just the decline of this idea that marriage is good for everyone, right? It's having major effects on just the world, right? Like, and those are being compounded through other things that are also being pushed forward and being, transformed. But we're seeing a huge issue with people just feeling like there's no reason to connect anymore, right? Like, what's the point? Mm-hmm. And when that happens, we see skyrockets in loneliness, which leads to depression and anxiety. We see all of these different things just compounding each other. And so it's like, I think your your statement on the fact that we're just pursuing selfish things and selfish motivations in these ideas has really led us to being so selfish that we just don't interact anymore, right? And we see wild swings of even people not even being able to hear the other side of another argument, right? Like when we're not pursuing the fact that, hey, in marriage, you have to kind of do some compromise and you have to figure out what's going to be best for the family as a whole in your relationship. That models what we should be doing in our community interactions as well, or our political even, right? Like when you start ripping that all away, people aren't interested in doing anything other than what's best for themselves. And we're seeing that play out not just in marriage, but in every aspect of our lives, where you can't even say, I like the color purple and not get, ripped out of some community or say, you don't, whatever, right? Like I'm using hyperbole, but it's teaching us not to be willing to compromise in any aspect when we're not willing to see that happen in other areas of our life, like marriage, right?
Yeah, when you're in a covenantal marriage with another person, what you're doing is you're not just saying, I'm with you no matter what. What you're saying is, how can we continually change, mold, shape, invest in, grow our relationship with each other so that it really is beneficial for you, and for me it's building you up and it's helping you become the best version of yourself this side of heaven. And I think that it's really, when you are doing that, it makes you a better person, right? When you're loving a woman, and for a guy, if you're loving a woman and you're providing and you're protecting her, I guarantee you that what you care about in your code of honor will change. When you have kids, you will change. I can't tell you how many young men that I knew before they were married, who were Christians, grew up in the church, and they were pacifists. They were like, well, I need to change the other cheek. I don't believe in war. I think, we just need to da, da, da. Then they get married and then they have a kid. Guess what? They aren't pacifists anymore. They're protectors. Now they're like, I need to learn how to shoot. I need to learn how to defend myself. I want to defend my family. Their values change, you see. And these are the things that resonate with the deep soul thirst of men. So in the end, is it that hard to make the case that the world's idea of marriage is terrible? The way it looks at it, the way it treats it, the way it values is just a dumpster fire. It's a complete failure. And all it does is hurt people. It hurts men, it hurts women, and it hurts children. If you were to take a step back and look at Christian marriage, what you start to see is that it is the closest thing that honors the original intent of the Garden of Eden, right? And as we said earlier in this podcast, it's really important to know your definition of human nature. It's very important. And when you're young, you think, oh, that has nothing to do with anything, right? When you're young, you're thinking, oh, what do I need a code of honor for, right? Well, we used to live in a world where developing human beings was the goal. But today, since the 70s, as I said earlier, the goal is teaching young people to worship themselves. Because when you worship yourself, you become the most easily led, manipulated, and deceived person on the face of the earth. Right? Because people can manipulate you, appeal to your most selfish and base desires, and get you to do whatever they want. And that's what's happening, right? When you worship yourself, you don't care about anybody else. But when you get into a covenantal marriage and you love a woman, the first thing you learn is that what really makes your heart beat faster and stronger is when you live sacrificially for your wife, right? You're working, you're disciplining yourself because you want her life to be better. When you have kids, right? You want to do everything you can to help your kids do better, have more opportunity, grow stronger, go farther than you ever did. It's really remarkable how you experience that as a man. but it's so critical and it's so important. And so when you're that kind of guy, when you start to realize that sacrifice is good for me and working harder, but doing it in order to provide for somebody else, wow, what a phenomenal thing that is, right? That turns you into a better neighbor.
Mm.
That turns you into a better, worker at your work. It turns you into a better leader of other people. It turns you into a better politician, right? But if you reject the covenant of marriage, you miss out on all that blessing. You miss out on all that development. You miss out on really growing into, the person you're meant to be. But it's a challenge. Like you said, it is hard to do it. And here's why. Because what I thought when I was 25 that would bring me the most joy in life turned out to be completely untrue, right? Completely untrue. Not even close. Now that I'm 60, what brings me the most joy in life are the things that Jesus revealed to me in the scriptures. So in essence, when you're young, you kind of have to trust, you kind of have to believe, even when you don't feel it, that Jesus was right all along, right? You have to believe that the Bible, which has been around for over 2,000 years, actually knows what it's talking about. All the attempts to undermine it, criticize it, have failed over and over and over again throughout all the centuries. The Bible is believable. It is transcendent of languages, civilizations, nations, cultures, and you name it. The Bible has always been able to survive all of that. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter where you were raised, how rich or poor you are. The Bible's definition of marriage, and it's calling you to try to pursue it, the covenant of marriage. It is the best thing that will ever happen to you, and it will be the best thing to happen for everyone around you.
Absolutely. Well, Pastor, I'm excited to hear the grand conclusion of this series, and then we're kicking off a new one next week. But I know that this is going to be really impactful for a lot of our listeners and a lot of people that attend Foothills. I think this series has just been eye-opening to what we can be doing and pursuing in our relationships and why it's so important to be pursuing an authentic spiritual covenant in our marriages or seeking those, right? And so hopefully you listeners have gotten as much out of this as I have. We're really just moving the ball forward as far as the Salty Pastor ecosystem, and part of that is through people's generous donations. So if you're wanting to help us move the ball forward further, you can do that through the saltypastor.com website. You can go there and help support us so that we can continue creating things like this podcast. And I know Pastor Doug and I have talked about some other things that might be coming down the pipe that we're really excited about. And all of that will be helpful for leading more people to grow their faith each and every week. And that's what we're here about. So thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of The Salty Pastor. And we'll see you on Sunday here at Foothills Christian Church.
It's good to be with you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and always keep thinking for yourself.